Welcome to the Making Leader Moves podcast, the show that brings together powerhouse Latinas to discuss the challenges our comunidades are facing and the moves they took to prioritize joy in their careers. My name is Paulette Pinero, your co host, and I'm here with your other host, Johannas Rosales.
Hola a todos.
Woohoo!
Hi.
We have a great show today. We love bringing guests that are ready to have difficult conversations and call folks out when needed, including us. So,
Exactly.
today's topic is diversity hiring really helping companies see the root of the problem? Snap,
Good
snap.
question. Good question.
Yes. But before we bring out our guest and our amiga, let's define what diversity, equity, and inclusion is. So we're all on the same page and it's not what your white executive leader sent on an email. So let's do some let's define first very quickly. Hey Boris. Boris, loves coming into the show. Hey
He's a
doggy.
spotlight. He's a spotlight.
Yeah. We should do the logo with Boris. So, first of all, diversity. Diversity is any dimension that can be used to differentiate groups of people from one another. Very basic. Um, so, there's a lot of ways that we can talk about diversity. I want to make sure that we're very clear on that. The second, let's define equity. Equity is the removal of obstacles that prevent individuals from achieving their greatest potential. Woo.
It's a big one.
Equity, I'm going to say it again, is the removal of obstacles that prevent individuals from achieving their greatest potential. It's not a book club. It's not a book club. And inclusion is seeking out and valuing the diversity of others. So it's not that you have a black friend.
Right.
It's not that you posted something on Hispanic Heritage Month. Inclusion is seeking, there's an action and valuing the diversity of others. So now
Mm.
that we're very clear around what diversity, equity, and inclusion is, okay, Joanna, who's going to help us dissect this topic today?
I'm so excited for today because she is a badass. Today, we are joined by Ysabel Garcia, a first generation Dominican immigrant who identifies as a psychiatric system survivor and experiences suicidal thoughts since childhood. By telling her story through public speaking, engagements, social media, and leadership roles, she inspires others to be vulnerable and break the saneism around suicide and mental health. Isabel earned a bachelor's in child psychology and a master's in public health. She is an organizer, a leader in suicide prevention work, a former crisis counselor, and is now a diversity and inclusion in addition to a social justice consultant. I
Woo!
mean, can we just clap it up for her?
Mm-hmm.
Isabel, welcome to Making Leader Moves.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited.
We're excited to have
Yes. Super excited. So tell us a bit about who you are
you.
and what you do as a diversity, equity, and inclusion consultant and a social justice consultant. Ooh, big words.
I know, I know. Well, as Giovanna was saying, I do a lot of public, speaking engagements and things like that. But specifically, I do a lot of suicide prevention training, workshops, circle practice, presentations. And basically, I talk about suicide prevention as a social justice issue. I talk about mental
Yes.
health as a social justice issue. And that is my main message. Anything that I do, like here in this podcast, anything that I do, I talk about things from that systemic perspective that is often missing from literally anything,
Yep.
Right.
including DEI work, which makes no sense because it's supposed to, if we're talking about equity, right? We're supposed to be talking
Mhm.
about systemic oppression and things like that. But yes, so that is basically my work. I do also outreach. I do a lot of tabling. So I like to go to communities and talk to people about literally suicide.
Mhm.
And one of my goals is to provide this equity focus in terms of linguistic access. So I make sure that everything I do in terms of materials and education is bilingual. And so, yeah, I could keep talking forever, but basically, I use my experience as someone who has thoughts of suicide. I still do. And someone who has experienced depression and anxiety since forever. I use those experiences, what I learned about the system, the good, the bad, and the ugly, to help other people. It's about breaking taboos and myths and just being vulnerable and brave. Yeah. So thank you
That
for having me once again.
Yes, yes. I mean, we're really excited about this episode because I think this is one of the episodes where we're going to get the most vulnerable. I think suicide isn't really talked about like that, especially in DEI work. So let's get into it. Let's get into it. So Isabel, what brought you into this line of work? What made you get here?
Oof, that's such a big question. So I could answer it by saying what "Estoy aquí" really means, because
Mhm,
when talking about "Estoy aquí," I am here. We're
mhm,
talking about presence. We're talking about this type of availability. And one of the things that I missed in my childhood was someone to be there for me and ask, "Hey, how you doing?" Look, just literally,
the
how
basics.
you doing? Like, just you see, I see you uh, crying at times, or I see you overeating or not eating, or I see that you are not sleeping well. I needed someone that noticed me, that saw me, and someone who said, "I am here," hence the title, the name of my organization. And it's also about not only having that actual presence and someone seeing me as a
mhm,
person, but also about curiosity. There is something that I didn't have growing up. People that were curious, providers that were curious in terms of, what do you mean when you say suicide? What do you mean when you say you want to die? What is that? What does that mean? Because usually when people think about suicide, they think about death, they think about the outcome, but they don't think about, wait, what led you to that, to feeling, to saying the word "I want to die" in the first place. So there's a lot of different things that led me, a lot of different ideology, but the I will say the main one is my experience with the mental health and psychiatric system. So I have been involuntarily hospitalized multiple times when I was a teenager. Why? Because of that sense of coercion when talking about suicide. As soon as you say "I want to die," whoop, liability, things like liability, mandatory reporting come in, and providers feel that the sense of, "Oh, I need to save you, I need to call 911, I I don't want a lawsuit," type of thing. So that's something that I talk about as well in my trainings. But because of that fear-based relationship, I have ended up in hospitals, residential programs, in solitary confinement, uh, physical holds, interactions with law enforcement, and all of those experiences with the system also have led me to work and to speak out about coercive and carceral systems in mental health. And lastly, I will say I have taken almost every single suicide prevention training, mainstream training, so the ones that are very popular,
Hmm.
and none of them represent me. None of them represent the Latino, Latinx culture. All of them talk about risk factors, protective factors, and they are not culturally relevant. So I took it upon myself to do that work. Yeah, I could keep talking, but those are multiple things have led me to Estoy Aquí and to who I am today.
Hmm. I love that. I One of the things that I talk about a lot is mental health, and every time I do, I have my abuelas or or an aunt or my mom call me. Even if it is just, you know, it's Mental Health Awareness Month. It's it's not just that it's not talked about, is that it's very reactive. When
Yes.
you talk about mental health, when I talk about my depression, when I talk about my OCD, when I talk about my anxiety and how it debilitates me, right? It's very reactive. It's like, what do we have to do? Did you take your medication today? Did you,
Yeah.
rather than
Hmm.
proactive, or even, saying what you're saying today. I had a full emotional breakdown like 3 weeks ago, and I had a meeting with Giovanna. We had just like a regular check-in,
Yeah.
and Giovanna just said, how are you? And I was like, I'm not good, because we spent a whole hour, but no one had asked me, how are you? It was all like, you look depressed, you should take your medication. And I take medication. Medication has saved my life. um but it was all about sanar la situación,
Hmm.
then what is like, let's do a root cause analysis. What it was. My therapist was on vacation, so I was like, oh, she's out this week. um it
Yeah.
was all about like, what do we need to do to stop this, versus what is it that's really happening, what are the supports that you need, and how do you need me to show up? And that's what Giovanna did. Like, how do you need me to show up right now? Do you need to just
Exactly.
like talk for an hour, and I'm here to support? She sent me a care package too in the mail, which I
Yes.
love. I did my
Hmm.
palo santo, I did my sage, and all
Oh,
of it. Mi agua florida. She did a whole like abuelita packet, but it
I
was,
love it.
and I say this too because I feel like one of the things that is missing, not just with diversity hiring, but with diversity, equity, and inclusion work in corporations, is understanding the need of prioritizing the individual, because the individual is part of the system. And I, I've always believed that you need to build an inclusive space before you need to build an inclusive space, then build equitable policies, and then focus on diversity.
Mm. Yeah.
Because if the people that are there, and it happens a lot with white spaces and white companies, they go from shitty, toxic work culture to let's bring diversity.
Yeah.
If the people that are already there are not invested in the work, don't feel like they belong, don't
Hmm.
have a voice of all the voices by age, by everything else, why are we jumping into bringing people to not thrive if the environment is not ready to thrive? So I want to ask you, what do companies get wrong about diversity, equity, and inclusion work?
Base. Well, first of all, everything. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, that's true.
But as you were talking, I kept thinking about white supremacy norms. I mean, you can bring all the diversity that you want, and so what? The structure itself, the design of the organization itself is white supremacy.
Hmm.
So you can literally bring, I'm talking about black immigrant, throw all the marginalized identities there. And if the white supremacy norms are still encouraged, basically, if they're still a priority, forget about it. It doesn't matter how diverse this person is, they might still feel tempted to embody those white supremacy norms, making white supremacy still a priority. So, what is the point? So, I agree with you when you say, what about the foundation? What about, like, what is it? And when I think about when people, and when I say people, I mean white people, when they look at, well, let's bring diversity, remembering that white supremacy is about numbers and it's about the checklist and it's about the outcome and not the process,
The bullet point, and yep.
the agenda, the timing. So just that, the thing about bringing diversity, just that, bringing diversity without the actual foundation, without the actual work, that right there is white supremacy. It's like, what? So I think that there has to be, if we really want like equitable spaces, we have to talk about what is the actual problem in the first place, which is, again, the structure, the policy, the practices, the system, the culture. Oh my God, the history of the organization.
Mm-hmm.
All of those things have to be talked about. There has to be. And like, I laugh when you spoke about the book club, because that's another superficial form of, I think, of work. Let's talk about how to be an anti-racist, and like, let's have a weekly thing without not without systemic change. So
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I think, yeah, I'm gonna leave it at that.
I love it.
Okay. What are the socio-emotional consequences of hiring diverse without creating an inclusive culture first?
Mm. Oh my gosh, that another big question. There is a reason why many people of color leave their jobs um, unexpectedly. For instance, there's a reason why I got a business now. I left the nonprofit sector. Why? Because I was being exploited. Exploitation is really a norm in nonprofits, specifically for Black and Brown people. And so we say burn out, like we are burnt out, but I say no, we're exploited. Like
Yes, let's call it out.
I am doing my hardest to reframe my language to make the system accountable for those, social emotional challenges that we face. Because yeah, we are burnt out, but as soon as we say we are burnt out, we are putting all that responsibility of quote unquote self-care. And so, but what about the people who are responsible for that outcome in the first place? What about the policy? What about it? So I am starting to reframe a lot of my language to say that yes, if I feel anxious, exhausted, because I was working like more than 40 hours a week, of course I'm gonna be having a breakdown, because there are no boundaries. There are many times where boundaries are crossed. That has happened in almost all of the work, all the jobs I have had, where boundaries are crossed, where the workload is extremely high because they don't want to recruit more people because there's supposedly no funding or a lack of funding. The wages are not enough. So all of these things lead to uh, obviously burnout, stress, depression, anxiety, and suicidal thoughts. I say white supremacy culture, nonprofit, all of this stuff are definitely risk factors for suicide. Um, Relationships with supervisors, the power dynamics with supervisors, especially if your supervisor is a white person, or especially if you have a supervisor of color who embodies white supremacy values, what that does to your psyche, to your mind. I mean, yeah, I believe there's a lot of, social emotional consequences. I will say trauma. I am traumatized by
Mm-hmm.
all the workplaces that I have been part of. I still think about a lot of the microaggressions. That's another one, the number of microaggressions that, a black and brown person goes through the workplace, the code switching that goes on, because again, that white supremacy culture, that code switching that happens because you have to act professional, and apparently being black or brown is not professional in itself. I talk
Mm-hmm.
a lot with my hands. I'm loud, supposedly. I don't think I'm loud. I also don't think that I talk fast, but apparently I do. And all of those things are seen as inappropriate in the workplace. I have been told to calm down. I have been accused of being angry when I wasn't. So all of these things, that accumulation of experiences and that combination of experiences lead to that breakdown, to that crisis. And so who is at fault for that exhaustion and that crisis? I don't think all the responsibility should fall on us. I think the system is really the culprit in this in most of these mental health challenges related to work in a specific.
I know that Giovanna has a question, but I wanted to name that a lot of the characteristics of white supremacy culture, I'm gonna drop them, the original work in the show notes and in the notes on YouTube, so people can take a look at them because there's research done around these. Um, and some of the ones that you called out and some of the other ones that show up, because people really don't understand that people of color can also uphold white supremacy cultures. I want to mention
because
a couple of
because of the
them.
fact that we're groomed to think that all that is normal. Like right now when Isabel was like going like right, she was stating all these facts and I'm like, holy shit, what kind of environment was I? How did I survive? Like,
Hmm.
because I thought it was normal, right? I thought that was when people talk about code switching, like I didn't even realize what that was until someone named it out and I was like, did I do that? I don't think I did, but maybe I did. And then same thing, like when she talks about, people of color in certain positions, but they're already washed or groomed to think in certain ways. You're like, oh my God, was I also that person? Fuck.
Yeah.
So just so many nuggets and stuff in that I'm gonna like, my God, I'm just like, damn.
Yeah. Some of them are worship of the written word, which we do.
Yes.
Like, we need the receipts, put them on an email. Objectivity,
Well, even
quantity.
just like that, right, Paula? Like
Hmm.
we had talked about it one time in our own discussion. It was just like, how do you write like how just to write emails
Yeah.
is so, and I was like mind blown. And
Hmm.
then that's also when, and I talked about it in another one, like I'll write an email, I'll look at it over once and I send it. Like I'm over that perfectionism bullshit that like it has to be perfect. There has to be a subject title and a little outline. No tengo tiempo. I don't have
Yeah.
the time. Like,
Call me,
yeah,
text me, send a voice on WhatsApp.
I'm on WhatsApp. Stop it.
Yeah. Fear of open conflict, quantity over quality, sense of urgency. I hate the sense of
I
urgency.
I'm breaking that.
Perfectionism, right to comfort, that we all need to feel comfort rather than having open conflict and discussions. Uh, Paternalism, individualism, power hoarding, So I'll make sure to also add the research in the show notes so everyone can also take a look at that, and
Mhm.
use this conversation today as the start of their own personal and professional development because it's needed. And anyone, including us, like I was born and raised in Puerto Rico, and I had realizing after I moved how I perpetuated that. I was like, oh, I'm a brown woman, I'm Latina, minority here in the US. Like maybe I don't do, I was all of them, like check, 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 check. And then like the sense of colonialism and the history behind it. So I love that, but we have to blame the system because the system was intentionally created for us to, whether we're comfortable or uncomfortable with white supremacy culture, that we fit in very easily. That are our to go place.
Mhm. Yeah,
Mhm.
that's that. When I think about mental health, when I think about these suicide rates, I go back to white supremacy, and specifically the individualism
Hmm. Oh yeah.
characteristic. Many people ask, why are the suicide rates so high in white men, like white middle-aged men? They're high, they're high, and it's like, but why? And I'm like, why do you think that individualism aspect of no, 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 you do it, you are on your own, and if you win, if you have success, you take all the credit because you did it on your own, right?
Hmm.
It's always about your own, your independence, right? Your and all the rewards, and you can see that at the workplace. The rewards go to that. Who does the most work? Who doesn't sleep? Who is the most burned out? Who
Yeah.
doesn't take their breaks? Who
Who goes
doesn't
the
take their
extra
breaks?
mile? Who
Who
goes
goes the
above and
extra
beyond?
mile? All of these things are that idea of individualism, that white supremacy norm that we might not know. Right? I didn't know any of this language before while I was working. I have no clue. I was being part of reinforcing
Hmm.
those norms until I started to be educated, and I had to basically unlearn all these practices. Uh, Things like being exactly on time, like you have to be like, if you're done, you are a terrible person.
Hmm.
You're a terrible person if you don't.
Insubordination.
No, you have
Exactly.
to be at least 15 minutes early. Are you kidding me? And not get paid for it. Are you
Yes.
joking? Like,
Yes.
and if you don't show up
Yes.
15 minutes early, are you sure you want this job? Are you sure you're committed?
Hmm.
Y
It,
todavía no te pagan. You're not paid for that. So you
are you
obviously didn't
sure
get
you're
paid for
committed?
what? Let me see, an hour and a half of your time per week? Like,
Hmm.
let's just do the math quickly. That's insane.
All of it. And let's say that the workplace does wellness activities like yoga and meditation and all this stuff, but they don't talk about the actual problem, which
Of why
is
we need the yoga and meditation at work.
why do we need this in the first place? And let's talk about that. But no, let's do all these activities. Let's fund them, and let's, for what? If at the end of the day we're gonna go back to the same thing, not only are we gonna go back to the same pattern, but we're also gonna make you feel guilty if you don't feel better, if you don't feel, if you
Mm.
don't go back to the productivity, if you don't fit the benchmark, these benchmarks, we're also gonna make you feel like crap about that. So
Mhm.
take care of yourself, but like, let's not look at the real problem,
Yeah.
and let's make you feel guilty and like crap if you don't end up reaching this outcome of wellness. So again, it's a whole thing. It's a whole thing that I think about it all the time, and how to disrupt it. That's the, and that's part of our work. That
Mhm.
disruption, how to disrupt all of this, and it's very hard and exhausting, to be
Yeah.
honest with you.
You've sat down in one of my wage negotiation trainings, and one of the things that I teach during that workshop is when you are going into a salary negotiation. So if you've never heard it, one of the things that I teach folks is that you'll get an offer, say thanks, schedule the next time to talk about it. You don't have to go into a negotiation right away. Keep that power. But then once you want to negotiate your salary, your benefits, work hours, anything around work, expect for folks to show up late, to not show up. If you're interviewing and people don't show up on time, the person that's interviewing you, this is a tactic for leadership to know if you're going to self advocate. That's bullshit. And that is white supremacy culture. I have to teach it. I want my clients, I want the folks that I work with to be successful and know that these are the tricks, that like they're doing this for you to feel like shit. These are power dynamics. This is white supremacy culture. You need to know, because once you're like, "Ooh, are they not going to show up? Maybe I don't get the job. Maybe they're going to," you start thinking about everything, and you've already done all the work for them before they show up. But it's really to know how far they can push you. It's really to know how much and if you're willing to self advocate. And that's one of the things that I say. Like, I talk a whole hour, and that's the one place where people are like, "What?" I'm like, "Yeah, they teach that to like HR people. They teach that to managers to do that." That's I've this has been passed down through generations. Um, but it's a strategy used to keep and maintain power over people.
Exactly. And I love that you mentioned the word power dynamics. Power. Oh, power. Power is so tempting.
Mm-hmm.
So tempting. The idea of being promoted. We have spoken about that.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and as an immigrant, my mom, my family, she always talks about this idea we are in the United States, the country of opportunities, and you're supposed to have that 9 to 5 in the office, and you're supposed to be promoted and to keep going and keep
Mm-hmm.
going, because that's the thing. We get stuck on the keep going, keep going, keep going, and at the end of the day, are we really like are we really finding that satisfaction? No, because we have to keep going. And that's also another trap that white supremacy has for specifically black and brown people. So not only are there those tactics for that HR, for instance, that tactic that you were talking about, but they are other patterns too that are put in our way that
Mm-hmm.
distract us from the actual problem, and then we feel inadequate. It goes back to us and we feel like crap about it,
Mm-hmm.
when in reality, again, go back to the practices, to the practices and policies and all of this stuff. It's really messed up.
Mm-hmm.
It's just really, really messed up. um and that's one of the reasons I appreciate your work, because you bring clarity. You bring that clarity and things that people haven't. They don't know. They don't
Mm-hmm.
know. They don't know. They happen behind closed doors by, and they're led by people in power that want to keep that power.
Yes. 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 Ooh.
White people that say, "I don't want to be white," because I'm like, "Are you sure you don't want to be white? Because do you really wanna? Also, are you ready to quit your job to no? Oh, but you said you didn't want to be white,
Mm-hmm. Are
so
you ready to provide space and opportunities for other folks that are not represent? No, no, that's too much. No.
no."
You.
But I don't mean that. No, no, no. That's what you meant when you said
Mm-hmm.
you didn't want to be white. Let's be clear.
Mm-hmm.
Like, again, it's just, yeah, it's a whole thing.
So you're talking about systems and policies, of course, systemic, but also at work. What are three things companies can do to identify their to identify their blind spots around diversity, equity, and inclusion?
I think that one thing that has to be done is to have very, very, very uncomfortable conversations with employees, especially, of course, Black and brown employees. And I say that because I just had an experience where I did a workshop, and it was a basic workshop on microaggressions. It wasn't even, it's not like, oh my God, what? It's simple workshop. And the feedback I gotten is that many people felt triggered. Why Black and brown people alike for different reasons. The white people because, oh no, I'm white and I feel guilty about things. And then the Black and brown people because it's like, damn it, I go through all this shit. And it's traumatizing. It's like re-traumatizing for them to see the examples and to hear me talk about these different experiences. And so it's like, and during the workshop, I was like, we should all feel uncomfortable right now. This is normal. This is what I want as a facilitator. That everyone feels like they're taking a risk, even talking, even saying something, because that is, I think, one thing that white supremacy says that you shouldn't do. You should never feel uncomfortable. You should never take risk. You should always be guarded. You should always be polite. You should always be nice. And so going back to the question, I think first is to have to encourage a culture of vulnerability and bravery. I think that's
Psychological safety.
yeah. I think is like actually being explicit about not only like a freaking mission statement. No, I'm talking about uh, actually very intentional spaces that are actually part of the schedule. Like it's not even an extra thing, like an extracurricular activity. I'm talking about this is part of your job. Like actually going to this, talking about this. This is part of your job. Like you need to do this to do your work. Like and then I also think that we can talk about of course we can talk about training and workshops and all of that, but I believe that if you do a training or workshop or whatever, there has to be some follow-up. I don't think that just providing a training and I provide a workshop on microaggressions, great, what so what like there has to be something, some follow up, something.
How are we making sure now that knowledge is being embedded in the day-to-day work that we do?
Exactly. So how do we maintain that? I think that's another something key that when I work with organizations is often missing. It's very like, here's a workshop or whatever, and then it's like, okay, like I gave you some tools, and are you even using the tools? Do you want me to be available to, for instance, if there are questions afterwards, if there's things that people want to practice, like, do you want me to come in and do that? Follow up. Like that's another one. That's another thing.
That's what the yoga works too. Like,
Yeah.
do it after the workshop.
Mhm.
After, like, we're being honest and like have talked about emotions, and like, so we can then feel like be centered, but not just because.
Right.
There has to be action after the education.
That's yes. That's exactly That is exactly it. One exercise that I do in trainings that I really love, I call it the community care formula. And it's about flower, grow, and die. Which sounds like, what the hell are you talking about? But basically, it's a formula. Like, we can take an issue, let's say colorism, colorism. So what do we need to plant? What seeds do we need to make colorism basic to dismantle colorism? So that's one example. The grow is like, okay, there are things happening already, good things to dismantle colorism, but what else do we need? What you know is the quality of the water, like what is the quality of the water, how many times are we watering the plant. But then there is the die part, which are the weeds. When you plant this, you are happy with this plant and everything is growing perfectly, and then there's some weeds that
Mhm.
come out, plants that you don't want them. You're like, what the hell, you're ruining everything. So what are those things that have to be eliminated completely to dismantle this thing?
Oh, I love
And it's
that.
like, yeah, and it's like awesome formula. And are you gonna use it after this workshop is over? And I like sticky notes and things like that, so it stays, so the information stays. But what are you gonna do with it? So that's always one of my questions. Follow up, consistency.
Mhm.
Um, and then let's say the third, I always read these mission statements, the mission, vision, and values. Do organizations even review that? Like, let's go back and honestly, I know that, and they might bring a consultant to build like the mission, values, but are we really? Is this really just a website thing? Is
Oh.
this really? Is this really
Yes.
just a pamphlet thing? Like,
Hmm.
to put on the pamphlet? Are you just choosing trendy words? Very
Hmm.
trendy, very, there are very trending words that suddenly organizations use, like racism is a public health crisis. No, really? Okay. So, like, there are taglines and phrases that become very trendy. And I'm like, but what does that really mean? Like, are you just copying and pasting statements? And so I think looking at that is a good start, and actually talking to employees about it. Like, what
Hmm.
did you read this so-called mission statement? Like, how do you see yourself in this mission, vision, and value? Like, actually talking about it, and again, follow up. Hey, remember how we talk about this mission, vision, and values? Do you still see yourself in this?
Oh, I
Mhm.
love that.
Getting that feedback and going back. I'm just I'm just not a fan of superficiality. That's what I'm trying to say. I'm a fan of intentional actions, of systemic change, of consistency, of follow up. I don't know. Yeah, yeah. That's my
Yes.
conclusion.
Love it. So, after all that, we here and making leader moves. We love normalizing failure as part of making our leader moves. Can you tell us a recent failure and how you kept focused on your goals?
And no worries, we'll share ours too.
Yeah.
Right. Oh my gosh, failures. There are so many. So, I struggle with getting out of bed. I do. Doesn't matter how much I sleep or whatever. Why? Because sleep and rest are not the same thing. Let me put this out there. You might sleep your 8 hours, 10 hours, and if your soul, your spirit is depleted, forget about it. You didn't really rest. That's me. I believe that. And for me, um, I could sleep whatever, and whatever hours, and still feel kind of exhaustion. And so because of that, I cancel, I have to cancel meetings. I have to miss out on certain things. I might have lost certain opportunities to network or connect with people because I don't really want to write that email. And that to me, that is considered a failure in a sense because I I am not making the money that I want to make every month. I am not financially stable, right? And so when I think about failure in a sense, I think about how I am not necessarily being 100% in my work in the way that I want to. So not based on the white supremacy norm of productivity, but on my expectation that, hey, you love the work that you're doing. I do. Yet I still have some work to do, and I have to take responsibility in terms of there's a certain work that I have to do to feel um, whole, and I have been like pushing it aside. And there has to be a time where I confront my demons. That's what I'm trying to say, and face these fears. I have a lot of fears. I do. I have a lot of fears. And that's where procrastination comes in. I keep procrastinating certain things that I know will be life changing, but because of those fears, I keep doing certain things to not go there. And so I just have to do a lot of internal work to really be awake in the literal sense. Like be awake to write that email, to make those connections, to do what I love. So in a way, I'm kind of I guess the failure is I'm self sabotaging basically,
Mm,
Mm,
yes.
and I'm self
beyond relatable.
sabotaging, and I am, at least I am aware of it. But it takes some a level of bravery for me to confront those demons and move forward despite of the fear. So I'm not saying that I'm gonna get rid of the fear, like I'm fear, nah. Like I'm what despite of the fear to move forward. How do I do that? I'm still trying to figure that out. So
That's awesome. Thank you
That
for
is awesome and very
sharing.
relatable. I
Mm-hmm.
was going to say we definitely have each and every one of us and our listeners is definitely going to have a spectrum of that.
Mm-hmm.
I for sure had there, right. There are times or like a week where I'm just like, I'm procrastinating. Same thing. Like I'm not sending out this email, but why? It's the root of some sort of fear that, like you said, I don't want to face. Like, not right
Mm-hmm.
now. I'm just going to go ahead and binge watch Netflix and like,
yes,
How many times can I
yeah.
watch New Girl
yeah.
again? Apparently, 7 times. Uh,
But no, but the fact that you are aware of that, I think that even within yourself is like, okay, I am aware, therefore what are the next steps I can take? Because now you can't even BS yourself, right? Like
mhm.
that's almost where I'm at. It's like I'm aware, so I can't BS myself. So ¿qué voy a hacer hoy? And it has to be like one small thing. Just one.
Right,
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
right. So in a summary, I forgot to say, I'm not hitting my financial benchmarks every month because of the fear of basically fail. Yeah, the fear of failure itself.
Mm-hmm.
And just would I be able to handle the workload if I am successful? That success might come with a lot of work because remember, what does white supremacy say? That the more
Mhm.
work you have, the more successful
That's
you
what you
are.
are. Yeah.
And so if I fall into that trap because I see it as a trap, right? I don't want that. So
Mhm.
it's so complex to me. But yeah, it's like a cycle. I
Mm-hmm.
go
Mhm.
back and forth. I go back and forth. So yeah, yeah.
Thank you for being open and sharing. Giovanna, I'm gonna share mine first. Are you fine?
Go for
Good.
it. Yeah.
So, I've I'm a recovering perfectionist, and I try to use the systems that help me to be successful, but not overdo it. And I've been pushing back from scheduling every single thing in my day, of over analyzing and overcomplicating myself. I also like clinically depressed. I will always have been, always will be. But I also suffer from OCD. So I get very conscious of when I'm doing something because it's obsessive. And then I get a little bit scared. And I have, I go back today, I talked all about my OCD with my therapist and realized that I don't have hobbies and I need a hobby. Already have a plan for that. I'm gonna be creating my clients gifts for the holidays in my Cricut because I got it and never used it. And but I because I realized that I was being obsessive with my time and my calendar, I pushed back and didn't realize that I had scheduled work and meetings while my daughter is playing soccer or she has a game. And then I felt like I am the worst mother. Here I go again. You left corporate, you left the nonprofit world to not do that. What are you doing? And then I have to realize that everyone makes mistakes. Number one, because we would like to normalize failure, to not show people, first, to show people that it happens to everyone, but second, to for us to realize that we learned from failure. And that's what's beautiful about it. And I had to realize that it's, what if I'm sick? Am I going to feel horrible because I didn't show up? No. So I made a mistake. I talked to my daughter. She was fine with it. But I went into like, you're a horrible mother. You don't love your child. Like, into that very
Yeah.
dark and horrible space. And I had to like talk myself through it and talk about it during my therapy session today. Um, but it is a failure of a practice, of something that I done, of not being there for my daughter. But I just gotta keep pushing through, and next week is gonna be better. Like that's all I can do.
And you already did, right? Like, one, you announced it. Like, me and her, we had our weekly meeting yesterday, and she was like, hey, just FYI, moving forward, we're not going to schedule on Wednesdays and Thursdays because my daughter has soccer. I was like, great. Did you block it out? That way I can, like, you can tell me, but I need to physically see it in calendar. She's like, yeah, no, that's all done. Okay, cool. So like, what else? And like, it was fun because like, right, like she did this whole like thing in her head, and I feel like all of us do that to a certain extent. And like, her reasoning was motherhood, but to me it was like, you've already fixed the problem. Like,
What are you doing? What's
you've
the
already
problem?
talked to Sophia. You've already told me and blocked your calendar for the rest of the quarter. Like, get my psyche hacer. Like, we could cry some more. I don't have a problem. Always down for a good cry.
Yes.
So no solution, just talking, like, got it,
Mhm.
And I think, and then, so coming into my story, like, not the same way as far as motherhood, but I had to do, there's this crash course that I'm taking and I have to finish it in 2 days. Today's the last day. And yesterday I felt really, really sick, like really sick. I woke up at 6:30 in the morning to do this course. And I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna lay down on my couch and I'm gonna put my laptop on the desk and I'm gonna just take notes while I'm laying down. And maybe an hour into it, I was like, why am I laying down? You're not studying hard enough. Like, you need to get up, grab your highlighters, like, start outlining stuff. Like, stop it. Stop being lazy. And then I had to, like, literally talk myself out of it and being like, bitch, you're not lazy. Like, you're sick. Like,
Mhm.
you should be asking for an extension, but instead you're literally rotting and in pain and still doing this. Like, that's a boss move. And so
Yeah.
I was like, you know what? Like, you still showed up, you still took your notes, you're gonna go over your notes later on today, like, not a big deal. You showed up for yourself. So, ¿qué más hay que hacer? And I told my therapist today, and she's like, yeah, but also like, aren't you your own boss? So who told you that that's the way to study? Like, who told you to sit on a desk was the way to study? Like, you showed up for yourself. You're fine. And I was like, you're right. That is fine. Total meltdown for no reason. But again, I think it's just we all make these things in our heads because of systemic, things. Like, I think that that's a very systemic way of thinking, was like very corporate America, very buttoned
Yeah.
down. Like, I was crying because I was in my PJs yesterday. I never changed. And I was like, why am I crying? Stop crying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is I'm asking myself lately. I have been asking myself when and where did I learn that?
And I think that's what I did yesterday. Like, after I had the meltdown, I was like, where did you learn this? Who taught you this? Who said this was right? You showed up. That's fine. And then I talked to the therapist today, and she's like, girl, you're your own boss. So I don't even know, like, again, like, so
Where
almost
this
same
came
thing as
from.
what I did to Paulette. She's like, you already resolved your issues. So do you want, like, are we moving on, or do you still want to stay here?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yesterday I posted this.
You
It
did it.
says Isabel is feeling me today.
Meh.
You did it.
You did it.
It's like badly drawn, and it's like you're did it. In the sense that and people are like, what are you talking about? And I posted that in the sense that yesterday I canceled 2 meetings. I was like, I need to go to sleep because I feel like my body is telling me that I need to sleep.
Mhm.
So I answer, I am honoring my body. And that comes with, as you were talking, Giovanna, I kept thinking about that, how honoring my body then comes with a wave of guilt. Oh, I
Yep.
should have done that. I should have done the email. Or I should have, I these meetings were important. Da, 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 da. And it's like, but my body was telling me that I needed to go to, what am I supposed to do? And so it comes to, and it goes back, in my case, it goes back to this immigrant identity thing. You have to sacrifice. You have to sacrifice because your parents sacrificed everything. And so now it's your turn. You have to sacrifice your sleep, your whatever it is. You have to sacrifice it.
That's very true. Yeah.
And it's a process of unlearning, and just unlearning is exhausting too.
Oh yeah.
It's just, and it's like a constant battle for me, like a
Mhm.
constant existential debate, basically. Um, and
You're
it's
not
not,
alone, Isabel. You are
No,
not alone.
no,
We
no,
like
you're not the only one.
yeah,
we probably, each of us probably go through at least 2 a day, I would say, at
yeah,
least. On a good day, 2.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's I agree with you. It's
Mhm.
basically is, and also it doesn't help that time I feel is flying by. Like, I just don't know what's going on, but to me, months are just going by really fast, and I feel like there's not enough time to do everything that I want to do. And so it's like, it's the going back to white supremacy, the concept of time. You should never waste time. Time is. And so I don't know. It's a lot of unlearning.
Mhm.
It's a lot of unlearning. It is exhausting. And we have community, though. We have community. We have people that we can reach out, reach out to, that have patience and empathy, and to process it all. So at, at least I am blessed with a lot of community members that I can go to and just talk, like, not looking for solutions or anything.
Yeah, just
Just
like
just I
listen
need
to
to
me.
let this out, because if I don't let it out, I'm gonna be even more overwhelmed. So
Mhm.
I just need to talk, And I need someone to tell me that I am quote unquote not crazy, because sometimes, and I know a lot of Black and brown people who feel this too, they feel gaslighted
Mm-hmm.
by in the workplace specifically. They feel gaslighted, like, am I making this up? Am I being dramatic? Am I being, when in reality we feel what we feel. And
Mm-hmm.
so, you know what, we feel what we feel. I might feel emotions a little bit a little bit more than the next person, but is, who do we who what is our support system is what I'm trying to say.
Mhm.
Who
Yeah.
are the people that we can go to and be our authentic selves? That to me is priceless.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yes, that I can just, you know, be myself.
Show up. Mm-hmm.
Like, yeah, yes, just like that. I don't
Yeah.
have to pose with. That I don't have to be afraid of a microaggression. That I don't, just be. Who are these people? Who are these, or where are these spaces? Like the ethnic
Mm-hmm.
study, right? The ethnic study. I love to go to the co-working space because I feel like I can just be. So yeah, I think that's
Yeah.
important.
I
I
love
agree
that.
100%.
So where can people find you, Isabel? I know you're on every platform, but can you just
Yeah.
mention them and how can they find you?
Yeah, so I am in, I'm in Facebook with Estoy Aquí LLC, Twitter, Estoy Aquí LLC, Instagram, just guess the username. Estoy Aquí
Yeah, that's
LLC. So basically, Estoy Aquí LLC on Facebook,
everywhere.
Twitter, Instagram. On LinkedIn is YS Garcia. And for communicating, if if anybody is interested on a training, a workshop, circle practice, or presentation about suicide prevention, mental health, social justice, DEI, etc., you can contact me via email at estoy aquí community at gmail.com. And also I have my website, which is estoy/aquí.org. In there you can see all of the different programs that I offer. I always say, if you don't see something that catches your attention, or you would like something similar to one of the things I'm providing, we can always consult, and I can create something, a workshop, curriculum, whatever, specifically for the organization to fit their needs. So yeah, that's
Thank you.
that's
She's
me.
everywhere, so you will find her.
Literally everywhere.
Right,
Thank
right, right. Yes, yes, yes. Especially now in Springfield, I'm gonna be doing a lot of tabling in different spaces. I am releasing an outreach program called La Cultura Sana, the Culture Cures, where I am going to be providing dialogues to, I call them the original counselors. I believe there are people in our community who are already doing emotional support work, but we don't
Mm-hmm.
necessarily recognize them as such, like hairstylists, barbers, even
Yeah.
bartenders. I mean, we're talking about a ton of people who do community care, who do community
Mm-hmm.
mental health, and but they're not necessarily recognized that way by the system. So I want to reach out to people who are on those who are on those roles, and have dialogues and talk about how can we work together to increase that community mental health, to help each other basically. um, we don't have to depend so much on the mental health psychiatric system. We also have each other. We have a lot of strengths, cultural strengths, that I think we need to tap into, especially in the Latino, Latinx, and Black community. And yeah, so I'm gonna be promoting those dialogues for hairstylists and barbers next week,
Love it.
and doing tabling. barber shops or libraries, hair salons, bars, bodegas, places where our people go to. And I just want to get away from the whole reach out type of thing. Like reach out, reach out, reach out, but then there are a bunch of barriers to that reaching
Yeah.
out. There's waiting lists. There's not culturally relevant services. So how do we get to our people? How do we get there? How are we, present? How do I say estoy aquí in a way that doesn't perpetuate iniquities? So yeah.
That's awesome. Well,
It is awesome.
thank you so much for joining us and having this amazing conversation.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. And then we're just going to let our viewers and listeners know to please don't forget to leave us a review. 5 estrellitas, por favor, 5 stars. And Isabel just talked about the importance of community, how she's going to go ahead and start developing her own community with barbershops and hair salons. We would love for you to join our online community, Making Leader Moves on Facebook. And if you have a question, please feel free to send them to makingleadermoves@gmail.com.
Well, thank you so much. I love this conversation. We know Isabel is going to return and talk more about it. We have for season 2 a conversation just about mental health. So we're excited to bring you back.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me, and I definitely look forward to do this again. I loved it. So thank you so
Awesome.
much.
Awesome. Thank you so
Bye.
much. Bye.